But if Fit for an Autopsy for some terrible reason wanted to replace their singer, they could probably grab one of these ladies. Megan could probably make that work. Welcome, metalheads. I'm the host of Heavy Metal Philosophy and writer for Metal Digest, John Barbas. Make sure you stick around to the end of the episode for this week's Riff of the Week. Y'all remember last year when I made that episode about my top 6 best female death metal vocalists? Well, we need to add one to that list. This Friday, June the 23rd, we're getting a new album from the band Vexed called Negative Energy, and I am stoked for this one. This band could be the next big thing in female-fronted death metal. Now, why did we put that prefix there, female-fronted, in front of the word death metal? I will address that later in the episode, but first, let's just praise the band Vexed. Their 2021 album, Culling Culture, absolutely rules. I've been spinning it this week in anticipation for the new album, and I can't get enough of it. For those of you that are unfamiliar with Vexed, they're a very genty and modern sort of death metal / deathcore band. Lots of tech death in here because the guitars are so very technical. They border on progressive, but they don't fall into the progressive trappings of using esoteric scales and time signatures and grandiose song structures. Everything is tight and cohesive. It's just in the in-between spaces, you hear these guitar runs and you're like, holy shit, listen to that. That's the kind of technical prog that I'm talking about here. And Megan Target, the lead singer, she brings it, y'all. Standout tracks to me, if you want to check them out, is Hideous, Narcissist, Fake. There's a single that they dropped prior to their debut album called Elite. That one is also excellent. You just can't go wrong with this band. Pretty much the whole first album is all killer, no filler, especially if you like it very heavy and groovy, because while I just praised the singer Megan and I just praised the guitar player Mr. Bacon, great name sir, also their rhythm section is super tight. It's very groovy, lots of 4 on the floor and hi-hat work, and they don't really lay down on the snare too much. The blast beats are all very tasteful. It's constant head bobbing the entire time you're listening. But it's not just headbanging all the time. This band seamlessly blends the melodic parts with the heavy parts, which just makes the heavy parts even that much more heavy. And then, if you can't tell from the song titles I listed earlier, the lyrics. All of these songs are much more personal than what I'm used to in traditional death metal. There's no, zombies or slasher killers or genocidal monsters. It's all very personal. It all has to do with mental health and relationships and letting people go and persevering. So that's what I mean when I say personal. These all come from experiences from the band, which makes it that much more powerful. And then, of course, once I get into a band, one of my first questions is, well, what do they look like live? So I looked up a couple of YouTube videos to watch them play live, and I'm like, okay, if they come my way, I'm definitely going to see this band. Now, earlier in the episode, I called them a female-fronted death metal band, and in interviews with Megan, I've seen her take offense to comparisons to other female-fronted bands, particularly Jinjer. She got compared to Jinjer, and she didn't really appreciate that. She said something to the effect of, if I had a cock, would you still compare us to that band? Because I don't think we sound like them, but we both have a pair of tits, so that's where the comparisons come from. And I get where she's coming from, but I kind of disagree a little bit. What does Jinjer sound like? Well, they're a modern, more death metal band with genty technical guitars and groovy rhythms. Does that sound familiar? And yes, Jinjer has a female singer who has deep, growly scream vocals, the kind that we all love, and so does Vexed. So to me, the comparison makes sense. I agree with Megan that they don't really sound like Jinjer, particularly because Vex leans more into the gent than Jinjer does, and when they pull in outside influences, Jinjer leans in a different direction. They've played, reggae and jazz stuff, and Vexed has more of like a new metal sort of thing going on, and Megan does those really fast vocals. It's not quite rap, but definitely rap influenced. If you caught my episode about how I don't like rap metal, one thing that I said is when people bring in their influences from rap, it sounds good. It's just when people who aren't rappers try to rap, it sounds corny and terrible. Now, I think if people was to compare Vexed to, say, Arch Enemy, that would definitely be unfair, and the only reason why you would ever make that comparison is because they both have female singers. Vexed and Arch Enemy sound nothing alike. Arch Enemy has that very traditional metal sound, and yes, there's a female that screams, but that's where the comparisons end. You know, Arch Enemy is almost power metal with growly vocals, whereas Vexed is definitely more gent, modern, groove oriented, electronic even. So that to me would be way more offensive. And I even saw some people compare Vexed to Paramour. Yeah, that's definitely uncalled for. It's only because she's a female. But I think Jinjer's an okay comparison, really. But it's not the best comparison. If I was going to compare them, I would say it sounds more like a cross between Entheos, and then I can even hear a little bit of Otep. How many of y'all are boomers like me, 90s kids? Y'all remember Otep? I hear a little bit of that, especially on the more clean parts. On the heavy parts, obviously, they're worlds apart because Otep had that more old school new metal sound to the music part. But on the clean parts, I can definitely hear that influence. It might just be the new metal influence in general. I don't know if Megan listened to a lot of Otep growing up, but I definitely hear it. And the Entheos comparisons to me just really comes from the guitars. Those guitar players are similar in my opinion. They both are very technical, borderline prog. And then, Cheney screams really low. So that still doesn't really answer the question why we put that female fronted prefix in front of the label. And it's really simple to me. These chicks, Megan, Tatiana from Jinjer, Cheney from Entheos, they can scream every bit as gnarly and deep and heavy as their male counterparts. So you don't really have to put that prefix in there. But their male counterparts can't do what these females do. Listen to the clean sections for Vexed. And on the latest Entheos record, Cheney started doing some clean singing. There isn't a dude in death metal that can make those sounds. So that to me is what qualifies it as female-fronted death metal. It's not that the females are trying to be like the males because they're already just as good. It's that the males can't do what the females can do. When I listen to Vexed and I hear Megan screaming, I can't really think of any death metal singer that she couldn't stand right next to, with the exception of a couple of outliers like Will Ramos or Ivan Terrible from Slaughter to Prevail, but again, those are outliers. So by definition, the dudes can't stand up to them either. But when it comes to the pretty singing, what dudes out there in death metal or deathcore can sing pretty like that? Kyle from Fallujah, I think he can sing pretty, that's tech death. I think he can sing pretty and then do, of course, the screamy growls. But again, it doesn't sound like these girls. It sounds like a dude's version of singing pretty. That, when they're screaming, probably you could interchange the singers and each band would be able to go on no problem. But when they're singing, you can't really replace these girls. It's, if Jinjer wanted to replace their singer, they're going to have a hard time doing that with a dude. But if Fit for an Autopsy for some terrible reason wanted to replace their singer, they could probably grab one of these ladies. Megan could probably make that work. So at least for me, when I say female-fronted death metal, I'm not saying, oh, they're pretty good for a girl. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying you're getting death metal and then something that you don't always get. But of course, I need feedback from you all. What do you think? Is that the proper way to think about it? Or should I just eliminate that prefix altogether, female-fronted death metal? Regardless of all the pontificating, What I do know is Culling Culture is an A-plus album, and I have just as high expectations for their next album, Negative Energy. I've heard 2 singles off of it, and to me, it sounds like they're not just continuing what they did with Culling Culture, but Culling Culture was their debut album, so they hadn't quite got their own sound yet. And the new singles sounds like they're starting to come towards that goal. You know, the first album, the musicians, they get together, they write some songs, and then they figure out what works for them and what doesn't work. They've already gone through that process of making an album. So now on their second album, they don't have to figure out what works and what doesn't work. They already know, and then they can just put their creativity forward. And this is the process of finding your own sound. And I think from there, those comparisons to Jinjer and Entheos might lessen a little bit as they develop their own sound. And this beginning sound that they have, I think is pretty killer already. So I'm going to pick one from Culling Culture for this week's Riff of the Week. This week's Riff of the Week, I'm picking the song Fake, because when Megan calls you a piece of shit, it sounds so heavy when she does it. I love this song. It is a fitting Riff of the Week. And if you're on YouTube, you can click right here and catch that other episode I did about the best female vocalists in death metal. If you're listening audio only, no worries, links in the description. But most importantly, read philosophy, listen to metal. I